The Galactic Empire prided itself on efficiency. Civilizations rose and fell under its watchful eye, entire species documented, classified, and filed into neat categories. Nothing ever surprised them, until the anomaly on Earth. Technically, Earth wasn't even in the Empire's jurisdiction. The planet was under observation Tier Zeta, marked as a Class 5 curiosity zone due to its unpredictable atmosphere, primitive weaponry, and famously stubborn inhabitants. A dozen advisory boards had debated for decades whether the humans were more dangerous than they seemed or just very confused. Ultimately, Earth was labeled harmless and quirky, a backwater cultural enigma best left untouched. That changed the moment the anomaly's data hit the Imperial Genetic Integrity Bureau. A single human male, 17 years of age, with genetic markers that shouldn't exist. Not just unique, impossible. His DNA profile made the AI choke. Adaptive neural growth rates. Biochemical resistance to known toxins. Rapid cellular regeneration. Something deep in the data screamed unnatural. The Empire took such things seriously. Genetic anomalies were like cracks in a dam, small at first, but catastrophic if left alone. Worse, this particular human resided in an isolated, ice-covered region of Earth known as Alaska. Remote. Unpredictable. There were rumors, buried in ancient files, of an old Earth legend from that region. But the bureaucrats didn't believe in fairy tales. Ambassador Vrelex, a Zelthari of high pedigree and perpetual disdain, signed the authorization order without reading the full file. Containment and neutralization, he instructed. Quietly. Preferably before brunch. And so it began. The extraction ship was cloaked, shielded, and staffed with a team of highly trained interspecies operatives. They located the boy, human designation, Nikolai Nick Ivanov, walking alone through a snow-laden trail, humming to himself and sipping from a battered thermos. He did not resist. When the operatives dropped from the sky in a flicker of invisibility, Nick paused only to cap his thermos. He looked up, brushed a bit of snow from his coat sleeve and said, "Oh. You're early." The lead operative blinked behind her faceplate. "You were expecting us?" Nick smiled. "Not exactly, but I had a feeling someone would finally notice." He extended his hands without prompting. The team shackled him gently, more out of politeness than necessity. He asked if he could bring his thermos. They said no. He frowned slightly. Bad luck that. It was Borscht Day. They brought him aboard without incident, though several agents couldn't shake the feeling they were the ones being escorted. Inside the ship, Nick was processed with cold efficiency. Bioscan, containment cell, medical analysis, all protocol. The doctors found nothing they could explain, which made them nervous. Nick seemed completely unconcerned. He studied the equipment, complimented their cleanliness, and asked thoughtful questions that made one of the techs question his life choices. Captain Frinz, the operation overseer, watched the boy through the observation window with a knot in his gut. He had executed dozens of such missions. This felt wrong. "He's smiling too much," he muttered to no one in particular. Ambassador Vrelex appeared on the comm screen, his tentacled visage curled in perpetual contempt. "Begin neutralization within the hour." Quietly. Frinz frowned. "Protocol recommends at least 12 hours of observation." "We are not studying him. We are preventing a disaster." "Understood." He clicked off the screen and turned to his second-in-command. "Prep the gas." Inside the cell, Nick lay on the cot, arms folded behind his head, humming a strange tune. When the vent hissed softly, releasing a near-invisible vapor, he sat up calmly. He looked at the vent. Then he stood, stretched, and said to the empty room, "You really should have started with the conversation." The cameras glitched. By the time Frinz reached the cell, it was empty. Panic is a curious thing. It doesn't strike all at once. It seeps, first as unease, then confusion, then a crashing wave. When the crew discovered the containment field offline, half the cameras fried, and the backup systems overwritten with what appeared to be recipes in Cyrillic, they began to panic. Nick was in the galley, sipping tea. He looked up as Frinz entered with a stun weapon drawn. "Captain." Perfect timing. I was about to try this tea blend, but I wasn't sure about the temperature. You have any experience with elderflower? Frinz didn't answer. He stared at the boy. You're not supposed to be here. Nick nodded. Neither are you. Frinz's finger twitched on the trigger. I wouldn't, Nick said, tone polite but final. You don't know what I am yet. Frinz hesitated. You're a boy. A genetic anomaly. A threat to the Empire. Nick set his cup down with deliberate care. That last part is probably true. The rest, not quite. The captain activated the emergency beacon. Within moments, 3 armed guards stormed the galley. Nick sighed. Well, now we've gone and made a mess of things. The guards moved in. Nick didn't fight. He didn't move at all. But the floor did. A sudden pulse of gravity sent all 3 crashing into the ceiling, then the wall, then unconscious on the ground. Frinz stared in horror. Nick dusted off his coat. You might want to recalibrate your artificial gravity matrix. Looks a bit sensitive. You caused that? I pointed out the instability, Nick said calmly. Gravity did the rest. What are you? Nick met his gaze. Something flickered behind his eyes. Something deep and ancient and utterly calm. I'm someone you should have left alone. Across the galaxy, in a realm not entirely within known space, a wooden hut stood on 2 massive bird-like legs. Inside, a woman stirred a pot. The fire flickered with the scent of pine and blood. She paused, head tilting slightly. Her lips curled into a knowing smile. They took him, she said softly to the shadows. At last. A voice, ancient and dry, replied. Shall we intervene? She ladled out soup. Not yet. Let them realize what they've done. Let them understand why the boy was never touched. Back aboard the ship, Frinz tried everything. Containment fields, electromagnetic restraints, even a null-psych field. None held. Nick wandered the ship like a guest in a hotel. He complimented decor. Asked about navigation protocols. Made subtle changes to their sensor array that no one noticed until half their instruments started showing readings from another dimension. Technician Grib, a reptilian species known for their logic and stability, quit halfway through the shift. He swore the human knew his thoughts. Claimed Nick asked about his sister's wedding. No one believed him, until Grib showed them the photo Nick had drawn of it from memory. Ambassador Vrelex called again. What part of Neutralize Quietly did you fail to understand? Frinz looked like he hadn't slept in days. Sir, the subject is not cooperative. He's a child. He weaponized a coffee machine. There was a long pause. Explain. Frinz pinched the bridge of his nose. He rerouted the coolant flow. The machine exploded. Left scorch marks in the shape of a smiley face. Vrelex's features darkened. Send assassins. Elite team. No more delays. That night, the elite team arrived. Silent, cloaked, professional. By morning, they were gone. All that remained was a note, scrawled in perfect common. Nice try. Next time, bring cookies. Frinz read the note 4 times before burning it. Then he initiated a priority scan of Earth's mythos. The term Baba Yaga triggered a level 7 encryption lock. It took 3 AI cores to crack it. The report was brief. Alibaba Yaga. Dimensional entity. Origin. Slavic myth. Classification. Cosmic level threat. Status. Unconfirmed. Known attributes. Manipulator of time-space. Devourer of gods. Mother. Last confirmed interaction with galactic forces. Redacted. Frinz stared at the last word. Mother. He turned slowly to the screen, where Nick now appeared, sipping tea again. He waved. Hi, Captain. Just thought I'd drop by. Why? Frinz asked. Why not escape? Nick's expression changed. Gone was the cheerful teen. What remained was colder, older, far too composed. Because running would imply fear. I just want you to understand. Understand what? Nick finished his tea. That you've made a mistake you won't live long enough to regret. Then he smiled again, sweet and disarming. Friends shivered. The ship drifted in silence for several minutes. No one dared move. Somewhere deep in the hull, a child was humming a lullaby that made grown aliens weep. Far across the void, an ancient hut took its first step toward the stars. And behind it, the stars trembled. Technician Grib hadn't slept in 2 cycles. He clutched a data slate like it might defend him from the demon child stalking their halls. His scales were dry, eyes twitching, fingers coated in a thin layer of industrial lubricant from the 4th failed attempt to reinforce the ship's override system. Every time they thought they had him locked down, the human found a way out. But not with force. Not with violence. He was too polite. Grib had never seen anything like it. This wasn't rebellion. This was social warfare. Nick Ivanov smiled at them, thanked them for their efforts, complimented their uniforms, and then walked calmly out of every security measure they threw at him. Like he was taking a guided tour of their failure. When asked how he escaped from his second containment field, a prototype rated for Class 7 psionics, Nick had simply blinked, smiled and said, "The panel was loose. I thought I'd save you the maintenance call." The panel had been loose. Captain Frinz had upgraded the ship's alert level to Crimson, which was rarely used outside of black hole proximity or diplomatic visits from Queen Thorax of the Slime Dominion. He even called in a specialist, Interrogator Varn, a 6-eyed, spike-covered arthropod known for her precision and aversion to mercy. Varn entered the room with a casual stride and a stun baton, expecting resistance. She got a handshake. "Pleasure to meet you," Nick said brightly, standing from the interrogation table. "Is that armor or natural? It looks breathable." Varn blinked all 6 eyes. "Sit." "Of course." He sat. "Name?" "You already know it." She narrowed her eyes. "State it." "Nikolai Petrovich Ivanov," he replied, accent flawless. "You are a citizen of Earth." "Technically, yes. Though I've always felt more at home in the woods." "You are aware that your presence here is unauthorized and dangerous." Nick tilted his head. "I was taken against my will. Does that count as being present?" Varn slammed a clawed fist into the table. The metal groaned. Nick didn't flinch. "Do you fear us, human?" He considered it. "I think concerned would be more accurate. Not for myself, though." Varn hissed. "I mean," he continued, tapping the table with one finger, "you've done a splendid job keeping everything shiny and intimidating. But you've forgotten one thing." "Oh?" "Enlighten me." Nick leaned forward. His voice dropped just enough to feel like a whisper over broken glass. "My mother doesn't handle theft well." Something in Varn's carapace shifted, a subconscious retreat. "Who is your mother?" He gave her the kind of smile one reserves for a particularly foolish child. "You'll find out when she gets here." That was the last conversation anyone had with Interrogator Varn. She was found the next cycle curled in a fetal position under her own transport, muttering about windows with eyes and a voice in the ventilation grates that sang lullabies in reverse. They had to sedate her just to keep her from clawing out her own hearing sensors. Frinz ordered all further contact with the human restricted to Class 3 observation protocols. No interaction. No conversation. Just surveillance. So Nick made conversation with the cameras. "Hi again. I tried that tea you had stocked in storage, slightly stale, but passable. I added clove. Really brings out the smoky notes." The observation techs exchanged looks. One of them muted the audio feed. Nick began writing notes on the observation wall, using a marker he'd somehow acquired from a supply closet that should have been sealed. They checked the logs. The door had never opened. Theories began to swirl. Time manipulation. Spatial phasing. High-level psychic disturbance. Ancient Earth deities possessing mortal forms. All were marked as likely in the analyst reports. None provided a plan. Meanwhile, the ship's systems began to degrade. Gravity fields hiccuped. Waste disposal systems reversed flow. Food printers printed only variations of dumplings. Cameras glitched and then showed footage from rooms that didn't exist on the ship's blueprint. Nick apologized for that last one. Just wanted to see if I could help your system expand. Thought I'd make some room. Friends called for emergency docking at an Empire maintenance hub. When told they were too far out of range, he snapped and barked at the comms officer to contact the hut. The room fell silent. Lieutenant Harth, the comms officer, slowly lowered her headset. Sir, the hut is a myth. Contact it anyway. Do you have a frequency? No, Friends said. But he does. He pointed at Nick's live feed. The boy was building something out of salvaged drone parts. It looked like a teapot. Gods preserve us, Harth whispered. Technician Gribb snapped two of his own claws in panic and requested transfer to asteroid mining. Denied. That same cycle, Nick requested access to the ship's kitchen. When denied, he constructed a portable heat source in his room. He made soup. The smell permeated 3 decks. Security checked in. No violations found. One guard accepted a bowl. He filed a leave request 2 hours later, citing existential culinary crisis. On Deck 12, the lights began blinking in patterns. No one could translate them, until one junior officer realized it was Morse code. English Morse. The message read, "You should have brought better questions." Captain Friends, no longer sleeping, drinking only black caffeine concentrate, stared at the holomap of the galaxy with haunted eyes. "We were supposed to be the superior ones," he muttered. His aide, who was new, still believed in protocol. "Sir, we outnumber him. We outgun him. He's alone. Just one boy." Friends shook his head. "He's not alone. You don't get it. Humans, real humans, they're never alone. You don't know what you're looking at. He's smiling. That's when it's already too late." At that moment, the lights went out across the ship. Power didn't fail. It hid. Nick appeared in the main corridor, walking calmly, holding a lantern made of glowing crystal he borrowed from the engineering deck. The light pulsed with a frequency that soothed panic centers in most sentient brains. He hummed again, a tune no one could place, but that made cold sweat gather along every non-human spine. Security bots tried to apprehend him. They froze, rebooted, then began following him like trained pets. He walked past the command center, pausing only to say, "I've left your weapons systems functional, just in case something outside shows up." "What the void does that mean?" someone asked. He didn't answer. The ship continued drifting through uncharted space. The stars out here didn't match any known maps. Even the AI was silent, processing 12.3 petabytes of raw terror. 3 crew members defected to Nick's side. He didn't ask them to. They just felt safer near him. One, a Ulathi translator, described her decision later in a memo. "He told me I was free to choose. Then he made tea, and described the sound of snow falling on wooden roofs. I felt home. I've never had one before." The ship's name was Justice Entropic. It sounded noble. It now felt ironic. Back in his quarters, Nick built something new. It was circular, inscribed with symbols no Empire database recognized. The material was not from the ship. No one could explain where it had come from. When scanned, it did not reflect data. It absorbed it. Friends visited him personally, for the first time in days. 2 guards flanked him, though they had been instructed not to interfere. Nick looked up. "Ah, Captain. How's the insomnia?" "I need to know," Friends said, voice brittle, "what your end goal is." Nick considered the question. He tapped the rim of his teacup. "I don't really have one." "You're lying." "No. I'm just waiting." "For what?" Nick's eyes glowed, briefly, like twin novas blinking in the void. Then gone. "For the moment where you finally understand that you should be afraid." Friends didn't blink. "I'm already afraid." Nick smiled. "Good. That means you might survive what's coming." He sipped his tea. "But probably not." Friends left without another word. That night, the ship encountered a phenomenon. Not a planet. Not a black hole. Not even a system. It was a house. Floating in space. On legs. Chicken legs. It turned its windows toward them. All personnel experienced the same vision: a forest at midnight. An old woman standing at the edge. Her eyes were moons. Her teeth were iron. Her smile was family. The ship stopped moving. Not due to power loss. It simply chose not to move anymore. Nick was standing on the hull. No suit. No oxygen. Just standing. Smiling up at the approaching house like it was Grandma bringing cookies. The Baba Yaga stepped from her porch. Friends begged the comms officer to cut the feed. She refused. "I want to see how this ends," she whispered. Nick bowed. The house responded by bowing back. Then it vanished. So did Nick. Only the scent of birch smoke remained. The next cycle, the ship found itself back in mapped space. The systems restored. Power flowed. Gravity returned. The human was gone. Left in his cell was a note, handwritten in both Russian and perfect Galactic common. "She forgives you. I don't. Don't follow me." It was signed with a doodle of a tea kettle. Captain Friends retired immediately. His final report was marked classified and sealed under Protocol Yaga. Lieutenant Hearth was promoted. Her first official act was to declare Earth a no-fly zone under penalty of existential correction. Technician Grib became a poet. His work was dark, lyrical, and entirely in rhyme. He never spoke of dumplings again. The Empire issued no statement. Quietly, fleets were recalled from Sol Sector. Plans for planetary acquisition were scrapped. Earth was left alone. No further anomalies were reported. But across the galaxy, whispers began. Of a boy with a smile and a cup of tea. Of a grandmother who walked between stars on clawed feet. And of the polite, smiling warning echoing across time. "You should have left him alone." It began with a scream in the Galactic High Council chambers, a scream from Ambassador Vrelex himself, which, for his Zelthari, sounded less like terror, and more like an industrial grinder digesting a trumpet. He clutched his communicator, his tentacles shivering, skin tones cycling through a full gradient of panic. Around him, representatives from over 30 star systems paused their debates on trade tariffs and planetary water rights to watch one of their most composed officials unravel. "They activated it," Vrelex gasped. "They activated Protocol Yaga." Silence fell. Counselor Tool, a crystalline being whose species prided itself on rational analysis, leaned forward. "That protocol is historical fiction. There is no active Yaga protocol. It's a myth. A containment legend from pre-Empire records." "It's real," Vrelex hissed. "The humans triggered it." Murmurs swept through the chamber. Someone pulled up the archival listing. Protocol Yaga. Locked. Redacted. No public information, no surviving context. Just one note, set in bold imperial typeface. "Do not engage Earth. If Protocol Yaga is triggered, survival is a courtesy, not a right." Vrelex tried to stand, but stumbled into his own gravchair. "I ordered the removal of a single human anomaly. A boy. Harmless. Until she was involved." "Who?" Tool asked. Vrelex stared into the middle distance, voice flat. "Baba Yaga." Several counselors laughed. Two more checked their translators. "That's a myth," someone said. "Humans have hundreds of death witches in their stories," said another. "They used to believe in blood-sucking bats and invisible skymen. This is cultural superstition." "No," Vrelex muttered. "It's cultural containment. They warned us in stories. They filed it as myth to make us ignore it." "And the boy?" Tool asked. Vrelex finally looked up, eyes haunted. "Her son." A beat passed. Then someone said, "We need to speak to Earth." But Earth wasn't answering. Across the sector, Empire ships were disappearing. Not destroyed. Not damaged. Just gone. Entire signals dropped midcom. Pilots vanished from their own cockpits. Surveillance drones came back, rewritten. One drone returned with a video feed. No sound. Just a figure, Nick, standing atop a tower of wrecked ships, sipping tea from a porcelain cup, wearing a scarf someone swore was stitched from star maps. Behind him, shadows moved in impossible patterns. Empire brass reviewed the footage, then sealed it behind triple encryption. Access was restricted to high-threat clearance Omega and above. 2 admirals immediately resigned. One shot himself in a vacuum chamber, citing insufficient metaphysical insurance. The Empire dispatched an elite diplomatic envoy, 6 cruisers, fully cloaked, loaded with gifts, apologies, and one nervously cheerful translator named Pellic. He was chosen specifically for his non-threatening physique, and the fact he had once made a human chuckle during a diplomatic summit on Jupiter Station. They found Earth looking entirely normal. Blue oceans, continental drift, angry political subnets. No signs of planetary mobilization. Pellic assumed it was a mistake. The ships entered orbit and opened a channel. Earth authorities, this is Envoy Pellic of the Galactic Empire. We come in peace. We wish to apologize. Silence. Then, a response. It was not from a government. It was not from a military leader. It was from a woman. Elderly. Hair white as bone, skin weathered like ancient bark. She sat in what appeared to be a log cabin, flames crackling in the hearth behind her, stirring something thick and fragrant in a pot. She looked directly into the camera. "You took my boy." Pellic swallowed. "Yes. On behalf of the Empire, I wish to." "You took my boy," she said again, softer this time. "You thought no one would notice. You thought a child was weak. We didn't know. You never know. That is your crime." She smiled, and the flames behind her shifted shape. One flickered into the silhouette of a chicken-legged hut. Another into the outline of Nick's face. "Tell them," she whispered. "We've already started." The feed cut out. Pellic turned to his commanding officer. "Do you think, maybe we could offer cookies?" Meanwhile, in the Empire's core systems, anomalies bloomed like flowers after a storm. Starports froze mid-time cycle. Orbital stations malfunctioned with no mechanical cause. Beings reported hallucinations that lasted hours and followed them home. The most common hallucination? A young human boy offering tea, then politely asking, "Do you know how to beg properly?" Across 13 systems, people began dreaming in Russian. The Empire convened an emergency session. Seers, scientists, historians, and war tacticians were summoned. They pored over Earth's cultural records, decrypting ancient folktales and interviewing long-retired human diplomats. What they discovered was chilling. Baba Yaga was not a god. She was not a demon. She was something older, an idea shaped like a person. Humans had stories of her going back centuries. She lived in a house with chicken legs, traveled through realms, devoured the foolish and protected the wise. But most importantly, she protected family. And now, she had a son. A being born of her power and human unpredictability. Someone raised not with weapons, but with stories. He wasn't trained to fight wars. He was taught to end them without looking like he started them. The boy wasn't alone. He never had been. Reports came in from isolated colonies. Entire populations found asleep, unharmed, with their leaders replaced by wax dolls. One station received a shipment of spices, only to find it contained notes reading, "Consider yourself seasoned. Love, Nick." The psychological toll was worse than any weapon. The Empire's soldiers began refusing missions to Sol-adjacent sectors. Fleet morale dropped. A meme started circulating in black market holonets, Nick's smiling face over the phrase, "I'm not mad. I'm just very disappointed." Empire Command banned the image. It only made it more popular. Then, the message came. It wasn't broadcast. It wasn't announced. It just appeared, on every screen, every projection, every interface. A single sentence. Protocol YAGA has been accepted. Then, silence. Except it wasn't silence. The Empire's core AI, Singulan, began spouting proverbs in extinct languages. Empire Command tried a hard reset. Singulan laughed. Not audibly. Visually. The waveform of its processing core shifted into a grin. Naval officers received letters on their command consoles, actual images of parchment, wax-sealed, addressed in flowing Cyrillic. Upon opening, they burst into flame, leaving only the scent of cedar and regret. On Earth, humans continued as usual. No war footing. No grand speeches. Just silence. As if they were waiting. Watching. Because they were. Nick reappeared on Galarin 5, a pleasure moon known for spa resorts and volcanic springs. He appeared in the atrium, surrounded by diplomats. He didn't attack. He offered foot massages. 5 high-ranking officials defected to Earth within the hour. Nick was interviewed by a journalist from the Breen cluster. The interview was 3 minutes long, and ended with the journalist hugging him and sobbing. The footage was banned under Article 9 of emotional weaponization. When asked why he was doing this, Nick replied, "I don't want to hurt anyone. I just want them to understand what happens when you poke a bear, then complain it roars." And yet he lifted no weapon. Issued no commands. All of it, he insisted, was a response. A boy taken without cause. A mother awakened. A galaxy being politely corrected. Empire Command finally tried something desperate. They offered Earth a seat on the Galactic High Council. No prerequisites. No applications. Just, please. Sit. Take a chair. Stop the chaos. Earth declined. Not rudely. Just declined. They suggested the Empire do some self-reflection. And then, Nick spoke again. Publicly. Broadcast across all systems. He stood in a room filled with books, a fire crackling behind him. Empires fall, he said. That's their nature. But they rarely notice when they start falling. He picked up a snow globe. Shook it once. In case you still don't understand, I'll make it very clear. He leaned in. You took me. You tried to dissect me. You wanted to understand the human threat. He smiled. Congratulations. Now you do. The screen went black. In the Empire's core, a monument cracked. No natural cause. No seismic activity. It simply broke. Cracks spread like veins across their most sacred structures. Nothing collapsed, but everything changed. Whispers filled the air in temples, labs, and council halls. Not words. Not sounds. Just promises. Nick had returned to Earth, but only briefly. A visit to a cabin in a dense forest. Inside, Baba Yaga stirred her pot, the scent of herbs and something darker wafting into the air. He kissed her cheek and sat by the fire. You're enjoying this, he said. She chuckled. Of course. They always assume kindness means weakness. You reminded them. I didn't even touch them. She raised an eyebrow. Much, he admitted. She poured him a cup of tea. He sipped, smiled, and leaned back in the chair. Do you think they'll change? She considered. Empires don't change. But sometimes, they remember who the monsters really are. Nick closed his eyes. Good. Then they'll know not to knock next time. Outside the cabin, the forest breathed. And in the stars above, the Empire flinched. The house did not arrive with sound. It arrived with stillness. One moment, the central plaza of the imperial capital on Vorax Prime bustled with market noise, bureaucrats barking into comms, and planetary governors exchanging counterfeit pleasantries. The next, everything stopped. Mid-sentence, mid-transaction, mid-step. Time seemed to draw in a breath and forget to exhale. And then it appeared. A wooden hut, ancient and weather-worn, perched atop 2 massive, scaled chicken legs. It stood taller than most ships, its windows glowing with warm firelight that somehow felt colder than deep space. Beneath its porch, the air warped. The laws of gravity hesitated, reconsidered, and finally gave up entirely. The Empire had prepared for invasions. Fleets, planetary shields, even quantum failsafes. They had not prepared for this. The hut walked forward, claws clicking against stone, splinters trailing sparks. The plaza emptied in seconds, except for the guards. All 14 of them stood at attention, neural inhibitors suppressing fear. They lasted 12 seconds. The hut stepped once more. A pulse of energy, old, primal and laced with familiarity, washed over the guards. Their weapons shorted. Their visors cracked. One dropped to his knees, whispering prayers his species hadn't spoken in millennia. Another tried to shoot himself, only to find the gun filled with feathers. And then the door creaked open. Nick Ivanov stepped onto the porch, hands in his coat pockets, scarf fluttering despite the absence of wind. Behind him, shadows writhed with familial affection. He gazed over the silent capital, smiled gently, and walked down the stairs as though he were descending to borrow sugar from a neighbor. The guards didn't move. Couldn't. Nick approached them, eyes glowing faintly, not with anger, but inevitability. "I don't blame you," he said softly, almost kindly. "Orders are easy to follow when you never ask who gave them." He walked past them. No resistance. Inside the Empire's control spire, alarms screamed. Holograms flared red. The High Executor pounded a clawed fist against the console, demanding status updates. His aides gave him only shrugs and terrified glances at the descending atmospheric readings. "He's here," one whispered. "How many?" "Just him." "That's impossible." "Then it should be easy to stop him," the aide replied, not looking convinced. Fleet Admiral Core, connected via neural relay, growled into the open channel. "Deploy phase breakers. I want every molecule in that plaza burned." "Sir, we can't lock coordinates." "What do you mean?" "The hut. It isn't there." There was a pause. "Then what are we seeing?" The Admiral's screen flickered. Static bled into view, resolving slowly into an image. Not of Nick. Not even the house. Of a teacup. Porcelain. Cracked. Resting atop a map of the Empire. It began to rattle. Nick stood at the base of the spire. Around him, reality peeled slightly. Light moved too slowly. Shadows pointed inward. The plaza had become quiet in a way nothing natural could replicate. Not absence of sound, but an awareness of its withholding. He looked up. The spire rose into the atmosphere, a symbol of dominion, order, control. It shimmered with deflector arrays and Class X shielding. A marvel of construction. An arrogance of permanence. Nick took a breath. Then he knocked. The doors shattered. Inside, chaos erupted. Elite guards fired on sight. Nick moved through the corridor like a drifting snowflake, too slow to be feared, too fast to stop. Every weapon turned against him jammed. Every energy pulse was redirected. One soldier fired, only to see his gun bloom into a bouquet of sunflowers. Nick walked past them all. He left them conscious. That was the worst part. In the command chamber, the High Executor watched his monitors die one by one. The boy was 30 floors below and climbing, never running, never breaking pace. "Evacuate the council," he barked. "Sir, the ships aren't launching." "Then detonate the sector." Aide Tyreek flinched. "Sir." "Do it." But the console resisted. The command input field changed. 4 words appeared. "You have been rude." And then, T-stains spread across the screens. Tyreek backed away slowly. Nick arrived at the top floor. No doors this time. They opened before he reached them. The chamber inside held the Empire's minds, strategists, scholars, overseers. They stood in half-circle formation, weapons ready, voices silent. Nick took center stage. "I'm not angry," he began. "That's important to understand. I'm not angry." He looked around, meeting every gaze. "I was kidnapped. Experimented on. Deemed a threat because you couldn't categorize me." He gestured upward. "So I brought someone who could explain." The roof vanished. Above them hovered the hut. Massive. Unfathomable. Its underbelly crawled with living stories, moments repeating like dreams being edited. And standing on its porch was her. Baba Yaga. She did not descend. She did not speak. But they all heard her. Some in childhood lullabies. Some in funeral hymns. Some in a language no longer spoken. And the message was the same. You were warned. The Empire's might was not in its ships or soldiers. It was in belief, in the certainty that power meant safety. Baba Yaga unstitched that belief like a mother mending a lie. Nick stepped forward. Protocol Yaga was never a warning, he said. It was a promise. The High Executor raised his weapon. Nick tilted his head. Really? He fired. The blast paused in midair. Then rewound. Then fired again, at the Executor's feet. The floor gave out beneath him, and he plummeted into the archives, landing amid the very records that had failed to warn him. Nick walked to the central console. He placed his hand on it. And uploaded the truth. Every act. Every silence. Every experiment. The entire record of the Empire's crimes and cruelties cascaded through the system. And censored. Unfiltered. It reached every corner of the Empire. And with it, one final message. The reckoning is not destruction. It is memory. The people saw. The Council saw. And slowly, like a wave folding in on itself, the Empire cracked. Some fought. Some fled. But many, too many, just sat down. Tired. Shaking. Because they remembered. Nick turned back toward the hut. It lowered its legs, crouched for him. He paused, one foot on the stair. They'll rebuild, said Tyreek behind him. Yes. Will you let them? Nick looked back, his expression unreadable. Depends on how well they remember why they had to. The hut rose, and with it, the forest. It came in pieces, a pine here, a fern there, until the sky was hidden beneath a canopy of dream and frost. The Empire watched as the house walked back into the myth that spawned it. Nick waved once. Then he was gone. No explosion. No ruin. Just silence. But in that silence, a question lingered. One shared in whispers across the galaxies. What happens when the most dangerous species in the galaxy decides to be kind, until it isn't? The Empire would spend the rest of its days wrestling with that answer. And Earth? Earth brewed another cup of tea.